Welcome to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, brought to you by Pilma. This podcast helps lead lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Here is your legal marketing expert and host, Ken Hardison.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Ken Hardison, and welcome to another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And today we have the pleasure of having Ashley Oneil, who is the Director of Customer Success with GrowPath. And GrowPath is one of our big sponsors at Pilma, Personal Injury Lawyers Marketing and Management Association. And welcome, Ashley.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be on here and speak with you about growing your law firm. So very excited.
Yeah, the name of your company is GrowPath, so we want growth. Yeah.
Exactly.
And so you used to work as a paralegal for a large law firm.
I did.
Actually, it was one of my competitors when I was practicing, but I was gone before you got there.
Yes.
Yeah. And now you've joined GrowPath, which is one of the owners is the law firm you used to work with, Mr. Farrell.
Correct.
Who I've also had on my podcast.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
I've interviewed him.
Yeah, Jim's great. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your background and tell us about GrowPath and what is a Director of Customer Success?
Yeah, great question. So my background, I used to work at, a personal injury law firm. I actually started there and my main job was just doing some administrative work, just getting demand packages out. And then I moved into kind of managing some of the dispersals and the back end kind of things. And I was actually part of, just being an everyday, paralegal or user when the firm decided to switch from, the case management system that they were on to GrowPath. So I always like to tell, the GrowPath customers and law firms that I work with that I've literally been in their shoes. So there's, sincerely, there's no such thing as a silly question because I've probably had the question or the fear or the excitement, before, because I've literally been there. So yeah, I went through kind of that as just a normal, paralegal. And then the opportunity came to come to GrowPath as it was growing, no pun intended. And, it was first kind of presented to me as just an opportunity to train other paralegals on the software. And I've really enjoyed seeing, the company grow. I did primarily work with the implementations of GrowPath for a number of years. So I've worked really closely with a lot of the firms that have onboarded with GrowPath. And now I have recently moved into a new role, which is Director of Customer Success. So I'm very excited about that because I'm now shifting to work with our existing customers more to make sure that they're getting the most out of the software. So, hey, we really want to do this. How can we be more efficient? How can we be more productive? So I'm kind of working with them on creating solutions, within the software. I'm advocating for them on new features that they might need. I'm keeping them up to date on the new features that we have, available or coming up. So I'm really enjoying this new role because I'm able to kind of reconnect with a lot of the customers that I originally worked with. But yeah, that's a little bit about my background and, what I do here at GrowPath. So.
I always said there's no such thing as a stupid question, just stupid people that don't ask the questions.
Right. And if one person is asking it, then there's probably some other people wondering it too that are just a little too shy. So,
and one thing that I've been told, and I want you to confirm it or dish it, is that most law firms, when they go out and buy these case management systems with all these bells and whistles, and probably 80% of law firms out there only use probably 20-30% of the capabilities of the software. Is that right or wrong?
I would say that's right. That's part of my new role in GrowPath is to make sure that they're using more than 80%, that they're using all the features that they can and that they should be using. So I would definitely recommend that, if you're shopping around for case management software, there's a difference between support, which is, hey, we have an issue, can you fix this? And then having somebody that's really dedicated to their firm taking advantage and getting a return on their investment with the software, which is what my new role is. But definitely, I think that the bells and whistles can be really flashy during the sales cycle, but it does take some focus and some dedication to make sure that you are, taking advantage of all the functionality that you can.
Yeah, I mean, I remember we went from, in 2003, we had used the same case management system from like 97 to like 2003. We were ready to change. And so we changed, and so I can't remember who it was, but anyway, somebody told me they recommended like buying this package of training, like 3 days training. And my CEO told me, she says, you need to get 6 days. I said, why? She said, because it's never enough and we won't use it all. And it was and I see some lawyers get very hung up about the whole deal. I mean, I've got a couple I'm consulting with now. One of them, they're used to doing it the old way. And especially, I think the lawyers are worse than the paralegals. Because
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how to type. Okay. So I'm one of those old dinosaurs. And so, I can peck, but I use my mouse a lot. I do a lot of clicking. I do a lot of clicking. And there's just so much out there now that there wasn't when I was practicing. I mean, back then when I was using needles, we went from TrialWorks to needles.
Right.
And, now everything's got the AI where you can interconnect with all these other softwares. And now you got all these nice dashboards, and we just didn't have it. I mean, I had to run manual reports on everything, and it was a pain in the butt.
Yeah, I would definitely say, the training aspect of implementing a new software, definitely you can never have too much training for sure. One thing that I always try to do when I was doing implementations is you've got to recognize your audience. And so I would always have some attorney specific trainings that were hyper focused on exactly what the attorney needed to do. Attorneys typically don't need to request bills and records. No, they don't need to do that, but they do need to know where to go to find, what's going on with it. So I think, you've got to make sure that you know your audience whenever you're doing training, because if you can't engage with them, they're not going to listen, and you could have 4 hours of training and not absorb any bit of it because it's not applicable to you. So definitely recommend training is good, but it's also quality of training as well. So
yeah, I think here's another thing I want to ask you, because I've never got really to pick anybody's brain on this. This is fun. So I was told, and I did this, I only had one person in charge that could actually change templates so that everybody won't go in there and changing shit around all the time. Excuse my French. But really only one person had the key to the vault, so to speak. Is that recommended?
I would say, I think it really depends on the size of your firm, but I would definitely limit that circle and keep it close. I do think that there could be some dangers about having only one person, because what if that person, wins the lottery, or, what if the person is, unexpectedly, sick, and you need to make a change that's something critical. You might want to have some backup for that person, but I definitely do not recommend letting everyone have keys to the kingdom, because, it can just get really messy. I think that's also, after you've implemented a new software, kind of keeping that circle tight. But also I think it's important to keep that in mind too when you're implementing. There's definitely a thing as too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
You definitely want to identify, you want to incorporate, you want to include, you want to make sure that you're identifying those subject matter experts to make sure that you're incorporating what you need in the software. But at the same time, you do need kind of one decision maker that's able to communicate and make the decision that's best for the firm, not necessarily best for an individual user's preference.
Right. You want everything to be congruent too. You want people using different formats or different stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, GrowPath is extremely customizable. And I always tell people it's a great thing, but sometimes it can be, a not so great thing, because, we can make each case type look completely different. And that some people on the surface level are like, fantastic. I do, this type of law. Like I used to do eminent domain when I was working at James Scott Theron. And, eminent domain is completely different than a personal injury case. It's great that it looks completely different. But then you have to kind of reflect that this is all for one larger company, one larger umbrella, one larger house, and we all got to live together. So you kind of have to make sure that you're balancing that. Customization is great, but you do want to definitely make sure that there is some consistency with how the system is designed for all, for everyone, for all practice areas, for all users and all of that.
So I'm sure GrowPath I've actually looked at a demo of it. It's pretty cool. I like it.
Yeah.
Or I won't let them be sponsored or film if I didn't believe in it. I have to believe in it. Just paying me money is not enough. I have to actually believe in the product or I won't endorse it.
I agree. I'm glad you do. So
Yeah, it's just the way I work. But one thing that I wanted to ask you, what do you think, and does it have the capability, so people can run their own reports to manage themselves, like paralegals or lawyers, so that, say my case list with all, like if I'm a lawyer, I got a case list and I've got them tagged like different way we used to do it. I don't know how other firms do it, but we used to have like different codes for what stage they were in. Were they treating? Was it demand ready? Was it demand out? Was it in litigation? Was it, the trial ready? We had different codes, and then we would run a report, and we could see, and then I could also run a report, how many days has this file been open, or the paralegals could run a checklist of all the cases they got that have been released but haven't got the medicals in or something like that. Can you do that with GrowPath? Or
absolutely. There's definitely many ways that you can achieve all of those situations that you just outlined there. We have a search page. We actually have two search tools inside of the application. And of course, depending on the firm's needs, it depends if, they want people to have access to, the prime level, I suppose you could call it. But we definitely have the ability for users to kind of create their own searches and save those searches if they want to kind of come back to them. We also have tools, we call them matter trackers, but essentially what those are saved queries or saved searches that are updating in real time as the case progresses. And so those can constantly be there. So you can see here are all of my cases that have been in the treatment status for longer than 90 days or longer than 6 months. And, well, what's going on with these? Let's get these moving. Oh, well, maybe this is more of a major injury. Maybe we need to get litigation to evaluate this. And, being able to see that without even having to remember to search for it, right. That's the real power behind those matter trackers, is that the firm can set some standards of what they want their users to always have at top of mind. They're not relying on their, in-house training to say, hey, make sure that you're running this search or running this report every Monday. You can have that just sitting on those users' page and, condition them and say, hey, look, this is a resource. This is what you need to be looking at. And it's just there for them. So we have those, and then we do have some of those really, shiny, dynamic dashboard reports that are a lot more visual. But I think when it comes to just simply searching your cases and being able to kind of manage your caseload and identify where cases are, being stagnant, I would say our system has tons of different ways that you can do that. It just depends on your user preference of what's most convenient, what makes sense to you, especially in your role. And then also, what your firm ends up designing kind of for those matter trackers. I think those are really helpful that firms can design and get up and running.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, really, I think it's so important. You don't want to be running reports and then jumping on people's back. If you don't give them that, they need to have access to be
Precisely.
able to manage themselves. And then if they don't, they got nobody to blame but themselves.
Precisely. And so I use GrowPath as a paralegal, and that I loved the matter trackers because it allowed me to have control over what I was being evaluated on. So for instance, it's very standard in like the PI world to say we need to do client contact every 30 days. Well, we can have a tracker on the paralegals page that says, hey, you haven't made a client contact note in this case in 25 days. And it can actually turn red to say, hey, it's been 30 days now and you still haven't made a note. Because let's be real, sometimes the paralegal might call the client and they can attempt it, but client doesn't answer, client might be busy. And so as a paralegal, I appreciated the configuration that my firm had set up because it gave me a 5-day buffer. And then I was also able to see, hey, these are the ones that are overdue. Whereas my attorney or my manager of my department or my performance, they were looking at, okay, here are all the client contacts that are over 30 days. So I had, again, as a paralegal, I had an opportunity to be proactive and to see things and to keep my work moving.
Yeah.
Whereas it can also show that manager what they need to see, which is how is my staff performing?
Yeah.
What's needing to be, paid attention to a little bit more closely. So I really love the matter trackers as a way to kind of manage and have more control over what I can do as a paralegal.
Yeah. And if I remember correctly, GrowPath also has an intake part too that just kind of flows into, and then you can just convert it into a new case.
Absolutely. Yes. I really love our intake. And we're actually in the process of, rolling out some even more new enhancements to make our intake that much more desirable, especially for digital leads, like, leads that are coming in through web chats and stuff. So one of the features that I love about our intake that I don't know if is really shouted as loudly as some of the other intake features that we offer is, during an intake questionnaire, you might be capturing some key facts about the case, right? For example, one of those facts could be that there was a DUI involved. Well, a lot of times firms struggle with the communication between the intake team and the case management team.
Right.
And one strength of GrowPath is that I can condition a matter tracker report, or I can condition a reminder or a checklist to be triggered off of the fact that there is a DUI in an intake. So yeah, that's great for intake, but what's most important is that if we end up signing that case, I want to make sure that that case management team, I don't want to rely on intake to communicate that over, or I don't want to rely on the paralegal or the attorney to review the intake details and catch that small, bit. I can have a report that says, here's all of your cases that have been opened in the past 7 days, and there was a DUI involved, or, there was a catastrophic injury or whatever. You can basically alert your case management staff automatically based off of the facts of an intake, which really helps make sure that, your high level injury cases, you might want to go ahead and get, security camera footage, go ahead and get that, from whatever area it was. Maybe it's the traffic light. I don't know. And those kind of things can be more challenging the longer the case, evolves. It might be more challenging to get that evidence. And so having that kind of safety net in place between intake and case management is I always encourage a lot of firms to think about that, because it really does help make sure that that intake is properly taken care of immediately from when it's, made into that case.
Yeah. So what are the biggest mistakes you see law firms make when they purchase one of these softwares, one of these case managements?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest mistakes, I think I've already kind of made the comment, but definitely making sure, the too many cooks in the kitchen. You can have your project team, but make sure you identify with one decision maker that can come in and make, the decisions. The other bigger mistakes that I see is that when you're designing and configuring the system to fit your firm's needs, think of designing for the 80% of situations. Do not build your processes around a doomsday scenario. Yes, there are going to be doomsday scenarios, and we can help, identify those doomsday scenarios. But if you focus all of your configuration around the 1% of things, it's going to really take away from the efficiencies that you can gain on the 80%. I think the other things that I always see is kind of similar to what you were already, speaking of earlier. You get this new, case management system, and it's like a shiny new toy. And, people tend to gravitate towards those shiny new features. And what I always have to encourage them to think about is, let's prioritize, let's get you from point A to point B. If you prioritize this shiny new feature that you never did before this, you might neglect something that's very critical. So don't get too distracted by the shiny new toys. I mean, most commonly I see this like with GrowPath, we have an integration with QuickBooks. And some people don't have an integration with QuickBooks with their current, legacy system that they're moving from. And they're like, oh, I want to integrate with QuickBooks. And I'm like, well, fantastic. We can do it. But let's make sure that we get your statuses, or let's make sure that we get this set up. Let's make sure we have your litigation department, set up for success, because we need your business to be running. We don't need to necessarily prioritize completely new functionality. Again, what my new role as director of customer success is to think, hey, now that we've settled in, let's think about some other things. And then I would say probably the other thing here of, kind of bigger mistakes is not doing a thorough enough job of user acceptance testing. And so what I mean by that is, at least with GrowPath, we give you a sandbox environment, and then we work with you on configuring your custom environment. And we need you to go in and test out things. And, the most common thing I see here is with mail merge templates. We need you to go in and, run these templates, make sure that they're working. Very easy for us to fix them, but it's definitely it goes over a lot better if we're able to fix those templates before you launch versus week one when you're launching and all of these users are already stressed about changing case management systems. And now their letter is pulling, the date of birth instead of the date of incident. And that's just like a random example. But, I think really taking the time to dedicate to testing out your site and then communicating the tweaks that need to be made to that site to your implementation team, that is very critical to the success of launching a new software. And that's definitely that's an area that I see that some firms, make some bigger mistakes. They kind of neglect it. They think it'll come up during training, or they rely on their staff to, find the bugs for them. And I think if the project team or whoever's kind of in charge or involved in implementing that new software, if they focus, some time on really testing the stuff prior, things are going to go a lot more smooth if you're able to kind of identify and, escalate those tweaks before you're actually live in that new software.
Cool. Well, we're getting close to the end.
Oh, goodness.
So what have I not asked you that I should have asked you, Ashley?
Oh, I don't know. Let's see. I'm looking at my notes. So I tried to prepare. I guess, I think the one thing that I always try to tell, the project team, especially the owners of the firm, is, what to expect on launch week. So I'm not sure if you want to ask me that question or if you want me just to start talking about it.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I always, I think, launch week is always going to be stressful. So I always encourage the project team and especially the owners to lead by example. Be positive, be calm, be confident in your decision to change case management systems, and take accountability for the decisions that you made during the implementation process, because change is difficult for everybody. But
Absolutely.
If you give into that change, it's going to, snowball, that it's going to keep going and going and going. And all of the things that you made the decision on, with a clear and focused, mind during the implementation process are going to become unraveled. And then the other thing that I emphasize, so I think some of those things are kind of, they can be, kind of, I guess, common to think about when you're implementing a new software or implementing any new change. But I think one of the things I always try to bring up is be patient and give your staff grace. Productivity, like if you have a metric of every staff member needs to get out 10 demand packages a week, guess what? It's not going to happen on launch week, no matter what system you use. So give your staff some grace, let them settle into this new system, you can expect a drop in productivity, at least for the first 2-3 weeks. I do think you can start seeing it tick back up, after the month mark. You should kind of start seeing progressively, increase there in productivity and kind of back to your normal, metrics. And then, of course, you should then be really exceeding those former standards that you did have. But I do think that if you don't give your staff some grace and kind of empathize with them and understand that they just had their entire case management system turned upside down, that the stress that it causes on the staff almost hinders the growth or their adaptation to the software. I've seen situations where, I was working with a user during like launch week, and a principal, and when I say principal, like an owner or a manager of a firm came up and was like, "Hey, can you get me, I need that report like now." And yes, there are situations that you do. I'm not saying that you should not do that on launch week, but it was, "Well, Ashley, I can't talk to you about this question anymore. I've got to do this." And again, there are definitely times and situations that happens, but I think that you've really got to allow your staff some bandwidth to adapt to the change. And if you don't do that, I think it can just really hinder, growth in the software.
Yeah, it'll kill
And
morale.
make it very
Kill morale, and then all of a sudden, everybody says, "Oh, we knew it was a terrible mistake."
Exactly.
And then you as the leader, if you don't stand firm with it, they're going to follow your lead. If you show any doubt, it's going to intensify by about 20 times to them.
Exactly. And I would just say, I think it also, there is a factor of size of firm. Granted, I came from a larger firm, and with larger firms, honestly, change management, I think, is a lot easier because there's this infrastructure kind of in place of there's different levels of who you report to and who, but with a smaller firm, you're that much closer to the owner of the firm or to your, direct, person that's working on the project. And so I do think, change management is hard for anybody, but it's especially harder for some smaller law firms or maybe mid-sized law firms for sure.
Good deal. All right. Well, listen, it's been great today. If people want to get up with you, contact you, how's the best way to do that, Ashley?
I would just say you can just email me. My email address is ashley@growpath.com. So that's ASHLEY @growpath.com.
All righty. Well, thank you so much. You've answered some of these questions that I've been, stuff I was told 20 years ago. I don't want to know if it's true or not. But I finally got to ask somebody.
Yeah, no, happy to answer any more too. So just let me know if I can be of any more help.
All right. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Have a good one.
All right. Until next time, this is Ken Hardison, dedicated to your success.
You have been listening to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, the podcast that leads lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Go to growyourlawfirm.com to find more ways to market and manage your law firm. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts.